What is up, fine people? Appreciate you listening today to the MyFi Podcast. Glad you're here. Hit subscribe wherever you're at right now. Hit the button, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher. If you're on YouTube especially, would love to have you as a subscriber on there so you can get the notifications, a little bell, hit the bell, all the things that you're supposed to do on YouTube. You guys know. Y'all do this a lot, I'm sure. We're glad you're here. We've got a killer episode. Man, super great artist, super nice guy. JD Clayton is on the show. He's got an incredible, if you're listening the day this episode comes out, this episode is releasing on January 27th of 2023. If you're listening today, or at any time, really, JD Clayton's got a new album out. It's his debut full-length album. Now, he's been releasing music for a little while and got some great stuff out there already. But this is his full-length, realized, authentic, amazing debut album, Long Way From Home. So go do it. Go listen to the record. But first, hit subscribe and then follow us on socials at MyFi Podcast everywhere, Instagram, TikTok, all the things you know. We're going to talk about JD in just a minute. We're going to hit a couple things and then we're going to get into the interviews. But yeah, let's do it. All right, man. Gosh, it feels like January has gone on forever. I see people post those memes, like it's January, 67th or something like that. I kind of feel that way too, man. This month has lasted a minute. It feels like I've been doing some traveling and working and making music and all that sort of stuff. And I was excited to do an episode of the podcast. I love spending time with people who love good music. I hope that you enjoy the episode. And it's been a great few weeks of the year. I hope you're having a great start to your 2023 and holding on to those resolutions still, hopefully, or heading towards your goals, whatever that is that you've set for 2023. Hope that's going well for you. And if it's not, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, get back to it, do what you need to do. Good music's coming out in 2023. There's a lot of records I'm looking forward to, but I just briefly wanted to talk about just my favorite records so far. See, what I do is at the beginning of every year, I create a playlist in I'm an Apple Music guy, so create a playlist in Apple Music. And what I do is any record that I feel like, man, this is a really great record, I drag it over into that playlist. And at the end of the year, like just last month, if you didn't catch this episode, I did a bonus episode about my favorite 10 albums of 2022. So what I do is over the course of the year, I kind of, edit that list and kind of, get it down to those 10 records by the end of the year. And so far, I've put a couple records in there, and one I'd like to talk about that I think is my favorite so far that's released, and it's the Måneskin record Rush. Måneskin is an Italian band. They're kind of like glam rocky. Y'all know if you've listened to this for a while, that's kind of my background. I love that 80s stuff. I love all kinds of music, but the 80s hair metal stuff, I definitely dig. So love it or hate it, man, is what it is. But Måneskin's kind of carrying that torch in this generation. They're an Italian band. One of their members is actually Danish, and I think it's the bass player, and she came up with the name Måneskin. It's a Danish word that means moonlight. And they're just a really cool band. If you haven't seen them, they've opened for the Stones. They've opened for they've just done incredible stuff. They're a really big band that, in the rock world, if you're into that kind of music. But go check out the record. They got some great songs on there. Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine is featured on a tune. It's a great record. One of those records, if you're not really tuned into rock music, it could be easy to miss. But I think it's in the top 50 on Apple Music on the albums chart right now. So it's maybe hard to miss because it's a really great record and it's getting some much deserved attention. So just wanted to mention that it's my favorite record of the year, but my record so far, that's the record I like so far. But we're just 3 or 4 weeks into the year. So there's a lot to look forward to this year in terms of records. And you need to go check out the JD Clayton album too, because that thing is gold. And I'm going to talk a ton about it a lot. I love singer-songwriter stuff too. I love all kinds of music. So I want you to know, if you didn't get a chance to catch the bonus episode for my favorite records of 2022, go back and watch it on YouTube or Spotify, or listen, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. Just in case maybe I mentioned something that you missed, a record that you missed, or a record that you're going to really love. So, we love sharing music around here on the MyFi Podcast. But anyway, record of the week. Let's talk record of the week. I got it right here. If you're watching on video, YouTube, Spotify video, anything like that, just to prove that I really love all kinds of music. My record of the week is actually Anthrax. It's called "The Sound of White Noise." And this record was an early 90s record. This is a 2020 pressing that I'm holding, if you're seeing on video. I think this record was like 93, maybe. I can't actually remember, and it doesn't say. I'm going to pull the actual album out and see. No, this is a mega. It doesn't say the original date on here, but this is a Megaforce repress from 2020, and I don't think that this record was. I think it was originally on Elektra. Maybe I had this record, and I got it not too long ago. It's on white vinyl. It's really cool. But I had this record when I was in high school, early high school, and I listened to it a lot. And you know what it reminds me of? And I don't know if you did this either on cassette tapes or maybe on CDs and now in playlists, but I would make these like mixtapes I had one of those stereos that had two different cassette decks, and you could play one cassette and record the other one. And so I remember playing, like, there are songs off this record, like Room for One More, and Package Rebellion, and Only was actually like an MTV hit kind of for them on that. And I would just like record my favorite songs from some of these records on and make these mixtapes. And I had like, I don't know, maybe a dozen of these mixtapes. And it was like, later we'd burn CDs, like mix CDs and give them to each other as gifts or whatever. And then now, we just make playlists and we text the link to each other, which is great and efficient. And I love that we can share a ton of music that way because it makes it really easy to share music. But I really do miss the cassette deck thing. I got one over here behind me, and I do listen to cassettes quite a bit, and you can get them real cheap now. But anyway, every time I hear this record, it just kind of reminds me of that time. And so I was listening to it this week and wanted to share it with you. It's that early 90s great metal. Anthrax is obviously a legendary thrash metal band, and that record was a really great record. So if you've never heard it, check it out. But let's get on with the episode, the interview. My friend JD Clayton is on the show. JD Clayton's he's an Arkansas guy. He's from Fort Smith, Arkansas. If I could describe the music, it is country music, but it's like country Americana, alt country rock. It's very Chris Stapleton, Sturgill Simpson, but also like equal parts, like I hear Counting Crows, great songwriter. He talks a lot in the episode about these, singer-songwriters from the early 2000s that were really influential in his life. And then his time, he tells some great stories about some things that happened during the pandemic and during a Nashville snowstorm, and some stuff that really turned him on to some incredible country records that changed his life and really shaped his songwriting. And when you put that amalgamation of everything that he was influenced by, it comes out in a really interesting alt country Americana kind of thing. But the way that they recorded this record that's out, Long Way From Home, his debut album, it's so authentic. It's aged. It feels like a timeless sort of thing. And he talks a little bit about how they got there in the interview. So if you're listening to this, like I mentioned before, the day this episode comes out, which is January 27th of 2023, this is also the day that JD Clayton's really fully realized debut album, Long Way From Home, is out on all streaming platforms and YouTube and all those sorts of things. So check out the episode, and go listen to the record, and make sure that you're following JD on social at JD Clayton Official on all the socials. And then his website is the same, jdclaytonofficial.com. He's going on a tour in support of several different great people, Josh Turner, Pat Green, some others, and then doing some of his own headlining stuff this spring as well, in February and March. So go to his website if you want to check those dates out and all that sort of stuff. Make sure you follow him on social. And I hope you enjoyed this interview that I had with my friend JD Clayton. JD, how are you, man?
Good, man. How's it going?
It's going good. It's good to meet you, man. Good to connect.
You too, man. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely, dude. I know you're from Fort Smith, Arkansas. Is that where you're at right now?
No, I'm actually in Nashville this week. We've been doing a lot of prep for the album release, and we had a kind of an album release show with Lightning 100 at 3rd and Lindsley here Sunday night. So I've just kind of stayed in town and gotten to reconnect with some old friends, and doing a lot of work this week in Nashville.
Good deal. Yeah, yeah. I mentioned in the show intro, but if you're listening to this the day it comes out on January 27th, this episode is fresh. JD's got a record releasing today. If you're listening to this the day it comes out, if you're listening to it later, it's already out. Long Way From Home. It's a debut of sorts. I know you've released music. You had the side AEP that came out back in October, but this is really a debut album. Like a fully realized kind of debut, because I know you've released stuff before, but this is like a huge deal, and you're kind of looking at it as a debut, right?
That's right. Yeah, debut LP, and kind of the first time that I decided I was just gonna put together a collection of songs and do the whole thing and swing for the fences. So here we are.
Killer. I was.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, dude. I was lucky enough. Your publicist sent over a link so I could listen to the record early, and I was driving back this week from a trip out of town and listened to the record cover to cover, and it's amazing. Really is, man. I don't know who engineered it, but I play guitar and do that stuff myself, and I always appreciate when records just sound really great sonically. And so whoever did it did a fantastic job on that too.
Yeah, that would be Thomas Doolin. He's got a studio here. We recorded the record in Nashville, tracked it out of his garage, turned studio. And man, he's an excellent engineer and helped really bring it to life. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And you're getting ready to hit the road. I see you're like crazy busy touring, either headlining or in support of somebody, like almost all of February and March, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, we're taking it to the streets. We got some dates with Tanner Usray, Josh Turner, Dwight Yoakam. We're going out with Pat Green. Nice. Yeah, man, we're having a blast. It's been really fun.
That's fantastic, man. That's so great. Good for you, man.
Thank you, man. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, you should be, man. This, I'm sure it feels like something a long time coming, because you've probably been working on this for a really long time to make it happen. So, man, celebrate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, you never know when you're starting out. Nobody has a clue how it works or who you're supposed to meet. You're just kind of weaving your way through a maze, and all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're just like, wait, you guys like my music? And there's all these people that are trying to help you and push you. And it's so cool, man. It's just everything I ever dreamed that it might be. And I don't know how long it's going to last, but I sure am having a good time living this dream right now.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I heard somebody say one time, like, in a music career, you just never know when you're going to turn the corner. And sometimes you feel like the dog that caught the car, and now you don't know what to do with it, sometimes.
That's right.
So, seems like you got it figured out though, bro.
Well, we've got a village behind me that's helping me. So I can't take all the credit. We've got so many great folks that believe in the music and have worked day in and day out for the last 6 months trying to grow this thing. So it's been a blast.
Yeah. Nice, man. Did you, growing up Fort Smith, you come from like a musical background? Your parents play music, or your siblings, or anything like that?
Yeah, my grandfather was a banjo player in a bluegrass band. They basically would.
Oh, nice.
They would tour around the region in Arkansas and go to prisons, feed them a barbecue dinner, and then play a bluegrass show. And they were called the Jesus Man Gospel Band.
Oh, nice.
So that's kind of how I grew up, was, seeing music through his eyes. And I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. So on Friday nights, after we'd finish up dinner, he'd pull the banjo out. And I eventually got to where he taught me a few chords on guitar, and I started strumming along with him. And, really that was kind of it until about junior high. And my parents, I guess, thought that my sister had a interest in music, so they got her a piano, and I would be, I'd sneak into her room and play it and try to figure out how chords worked. And eventually they were like, all right, well, you can have it. So they just moved it into my room.
Nice.
And that was kind of it. That's where I really learned, how songs could be put together using chords. I learned to sing along while playing, and, started using my voice memo app on my phone to record myself doing covers. And, it just kind of was like a slow process of learning how it all worked, kind of tinkering on my own and using YouTube to teach myself, different things. And, before you knew it, I was playing in church, and because I was the only one that, knew how to. My dad was a pastor. I jumped ahead, but my dad was a pastor. So it was, when it came time to start, leading worship and stuff, that I was the only one that really knew how to play piano or anything. So they just threw me in.
Yeah. So early on, like, do you remember some of the like artists or people who maybe it was stuff your grandfather introduced you to, or things that you heard that just excited you about playing music and or songwriting or whatever it was, but some of those in your early years of like getting excited about music, who were some of those artists or some of those records that really got you excited?
Yeah. Really, my dad was probably my biggest influence as far as music inspiration goes.
Yeah.
He had a good friend that took a trip. He was in film and took a good trip to California. And when he came back, he had 2 CDs. He had Jack Johnson's Brushfire Fairy Tales, and he had
nice
John Mayer's Room for Squares. And, I guess that was 01, 02.
Right.
And so that was pretty much all that played in our car for a long time. My dad became a huge Jack Johnson fan. And so, just that was kind of like the soundtrack to my childhood, was these early 2000s singer-songwriters, Norah Jones, Amos Lee. And, as I got older, going to baseball practice, football practice, whatever it was, my dad had a few CDs in the car, and one was Abbey Road, and the other one was the James Taylor Greatest Hits, that has, all the Mexico, Carolina in my mind, all the classics, Fire and Rain. So
yeah,
that was kind of my introduction to music. It was the 60s, late 60s, early 70s rock and roll. We listened to a lot of Creedence Clearwater Revival too.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, you had these early 2000 singer-songwriters. So I really had a love for, classic rock, but the way I knew the music industry worked from such a young age was just an artist writes a record, and then he goes on tour. And then he waits 2 years, and then the next record comes out, and he goes on tour. And that's just how, that's how I thought it worked because of watching, Jack Johnson and John Mayer. So
yeah,
I knew, I always had a dream that I wanted to do something like that, but it really was not realized until, my senior year of high school, going into college, started a little band. Just things started kind of coming together naturally. It wasn't like I was really trying to force it. It just happened. More so like you start kind of thinking, well, man, maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. When it happens naturally like that,
Yeah, dude. Well, you grew up listening to there's a Jack Johnson, John Mayer thing. I get the singer-songwriter thing from there. CCR, the classic stuff, the Beatles, James Taylor, some of the other stuff you mentioned. But you landed on like a really great aged country sound.
Yeah.
Like, and it just feels, one of the, I was thinking, I'm always thinking when I'm listening to records like this, and especially in preparation for, a guest on the show or someone, whose music I'm not as familiar with. And man, I'm digesting it going, how is somebody a debut album, this young, and it feels so authentic and so honest, and it comes from this, obviously you grew up in Fort Smith, it's the South, it's a little bit of a pretty country where you grew up, but you listen to all this wide range of stuff. And I know maybe your grandfather had an influence, but talk a little bit about how'd you land on the sound that you did? Cause it's just fantastic, and it's aged and authentic, and man, I don't even, Yeah, just the sonic quality and the songwriting behind what you're doing is so impressive. I just want to know like how you landed on that thing, because it's obviously really inside, like, you know, who you are as an artist, because it comes across so real, you know. So I want to know how you landed there.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think what happened was I moved to Nashville and left Fort Smith. My wife was working as a nurse and I wanted to do the music thing. So we were like, let's just give Nashville a shot.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got here, I had a couple tracks in the tank. I had recorded a few songs and I had no idea where I was going to go. I was just chasing Nashville, if you will. I was looking for what they were doing, trying to figure out what the executives wanted to see. I was just, all my days were filled with strategy and like, who do I need to meet? Like, what's the type of music they're wanting to hear and who am I going to send this to as soon as I get done? And so it was just all that back and forth and it wasn't going anywhere. And it felt so fake and so unreal. And basically COVID hit. I lost my job and went to work for a landscape company south of Nashville in a town called Nolensville. And for a year and a half, it was just me, you know, 4 guys from Mexico, 2 guys from El Salvador, and 2 guys from the Dominican Republic, slinging dirt, laying irrigation, and digging all the shrubs at the, you know, Nashville airport.
Wow.
And so I was just lost. I mean, it was just completely exile. Like, didn't see Arkansas was getting hit so bad by COVID, you know, it was just, and nobody knew enough about it. So it was just, you know, it was weird times. And so there was nobody on the streets of Nashville. However, you know, landscape work still went on. We could do that. And so it was just a ghost town and I didn't see my folks for probably 8 months.
Wow.
So it was just, you know, you're basically just dropped off the, you know, side of a mountain and just forced to go, you know, find your own way.
Yeah.
So basically my days were filled with, you know, doing just, basically I drove this dump truck from, you know, point A to point B, taking trees and, lost my ear plug here. Basically going from like point A to point B, dropping off trees and stuff for whatever job we had to do. Yeah. And so I had so much downtime to listen to music. So that's really how I spent my time, was just, I'd throw my headphones in and start, you know, listening to albums. I kind of developed a discipline to listen to albums from top to bottom.
Yeah.
Instead of just picking out a couple songs. So really I was going back and revisiting some of those old records, like, you know, Sgt. Pepper or Abbey Road, or Willie and the Poor Boys by Creedence, the pronounced Lynard Skynard, the first record, and then Second Helping by Lynard Skynard. I was forcing myself to just dive deep into these albums. And then I kind of, somewhere along the way in 2020, found the band.
Yes.
And I had heard of the band, but I had never given them the time they deserved. I had never listened to their records. And so one day I was just driving. I was like, man, you know, everybody's talking. Some of my old buddies are talking about this group, so I just need to give them a chance. And I started listening to the self-titled band album that was released in '69.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was hooked. That's all I listened to for, you know, weeks in and weeks out. And gosh, I mean, I think you know, this is a long-winded way to answer your question, but basically I developed an ear for how albums were made in the late 60s, early 70s. I started to develop an ear for production. I started studying the techniques that were used. So when it came time to record an album, I knew what I was going to do. I realized that I needed to get back to, my roots. If I'm gonna make an album, if I'm gonna ever make it in music, I've got to make an album. I can't keep doing the singles game. People don't care about singles, and no one's going to book you on a national tour or anything unless you've got enough material. So
sure.
So I just basically said, all during the landscape job, I had been writing songs and trying to stay on top of it. And when I finally had the 10 songs that you hear on the record, I called up my producer, the guy that engineered the record, and I just said, hey man, I've got 10 songs and I'm going to quit this landscape job, and I need you to set aside 2 weeks for me because I think I'm on to something special. And I've already picked out the band. I know who's going to, help me do this. And so, yeah, we went into the studio and we tracked the first 5 tracks as you hear them, from Hello, Good Morning down to Long Way From Home. And then we took a month off and came back and recorded from Heartaches After Heartbreak down to Sleepy Night in Nashville, the B-side, in two different sessions. And it just, every step of the process was I was having to cut the fat. I was just, because
as a writer,
in the studio, it's just so easy in Nashville to get carried away with overproducing and adding things that don't need to be there.
Yeah. And
so with all the studying and learning I had done from those albums out of the late 60s, early 70s, it was just like, man, it's just as raw as can be. You're just taking a microphone and placing it in front of the amp and letting the musician that you hired play and tell their own story. And that's it. Yeah. We don't need anything else. So that's what we tried to do. That's a long way of getting there, but that's kind of how I found my sound. I was like, this is going to be the Arkansas sound. And this is going to be, this is what I want to, if I was to just fit myself in between these bands in this period of time, I think 1969 to 1972 is the golden era of music. If I was going to interject myself into that time period and play a role of any type of way, how would I do that? And so I really had to remove myself completely from JD Clayton of 2021.
Yeah.
And reinvent myself and live how I thought somebody from, early 70s might live, and think about, life and think about music. And because I wanted to make something that felt timeless. I didn't want to make something that was new. And, we're not, in country music, it's really tough because we talk a lot about problems that aren't our problems. And that's not country music. That's not, country music is American music.
Yeah.
And so what we need to be talking about is we need to be talking about the everyday American and about their life and what their struggles are. Not, there are farmers and there are, cowboys, but I mean, the majority of folks that live in the U.S. are not driving down the road in their John Deere.
Yeah.
So that's, that I wanted to talk about the real everyday problems of country life, which is just American life. Life is hard, and we all miss our mom and dads because we're all out trying to make it somewhere. And it doesn't have to be music. It's just you're just going and working hard, and there's nothing wrong with that. You got to just keep your head down, but we all need to hear that it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And it's not just you. It's not just happening to you. There's somebody out there writing music who obviously identifies with that too. A guy who was working as a landscaper, trying to figure out how to communicate this to the world. And, man, you did great. It really is. Like, if you're listening, you should pause the podcast, go put the record on Spotify, Apple Music, and just cover to cover the record. If you're not used to listening to records like that, you'll still love the songs individually. But I literally yesterday, I was driving back into town and I listened straight through the record. And man, it's a, you said, I saw that you were out in support. And I think you mentioned this a minute ago, that you were out in support of Pat Green.
Yeah.
That makes total sense, because as much as I say that the record sounds really country, it does. It has great roots in country music. It still has that like Texas country, like Americana vibe. And I know it's like which, I don't mean to say it's a Texas record, because I do think it's really unique. And, you mentioned this kind of the sound of Arkansas, but I always used to tell people who would ask me like, what is Texas country? I'm like, I don't know. Imagine something like in between traditional country music, like Merle Haggard and the Counting Crows, like something like dead center, so even if you're listening and you're like, I'm not really a country fan, go listen, because it's singer-songwriter Americana. There's more to it than like a traditional country record, which are great in their own right. I love like old school country, from the early 70s, mid 70s, late 60s, all that scene too. But the production of it is, you very much hit the production part of that too. I was actually listening to some Fleetwood Mac yesterday. I had this playlist going and a Fleetwood Mac song came up, and I just could hear like everything. I could hear the drumstick hitting the hi-hat. I could hear, you know what I'm saying? Like little things. And then I cut this record on after I was listening to that podcast and noticed it was very similar in the sense that like I could hear, things in between chords and hands on guitars and, that sort of stuff. And that reality in a world where music can be, commercial music that we hear can be so polished that maybe it's almost unidentifiable or it's not as easily identifiable with as what you've made. And so I think there's a great appreciation for what you're doing and how you've done it. And so I say all that to say, if you listen to the podcast and you're going, I'm not really a country music fan, it's great country music, but it's also like Americana, singer-songwriter. If you love Counting Crows, David Ramirez, Ryan Adams, if you love that kind of stuff, you'll love this record. So you should go give it a listen. But
thanks, Lee.
Yeah, man. So I'm guessing at some point what your grandfather taught you kind of leaked back in, huh?
Yeah. It, it took a while. I wasn't a fan of country music. Going back to my dad,
could have fooled me.
We did not listen to country music in my house growing up. My dad loathed country music. He just he thought it was so cheesy. Really, what he was talking about was country of the '90s, which
I kind of like. I kind of like '90s country.
And I do too. I do not stand with my dad on country music, but he was singling out a few artists, and I'm not going to name names, but that he then blanketed across all country music. And
sure.
And so we just, it wasn't until I was a senior in high school that I was scrolling through YouTube and this video of Chris Stapleton and his wife were at the Grand Ole Opry singing Amanda, the cover. And it just played from my computer. And my dad walked over behind me to watch what I was watching. And we both just sat there with our mouths open, and he just said, like, good grief, that guy can sing. And that was enough confirmation for me to take a huge deep dive into country music after that. I was like, oh, okay, he likes country music now. So like, I got the green light, it was, so that really is what started it. And once I moved to Nashville, a couple years later, it just, I completely immersed myself in country music. I studied, all the, from 1950s to the mid 70s. I studied, I didn't spend as much time on 80s, 90s country, but I tried to teach myself everything I could about where we came from,
sure, why
we do what we do today, and, found artists like John Prine and, I grew up with John Denver. He was another artist. So I already knew about him. And I didn't see, John Denver as, fitting in with some of the country artists that we know as like the founding fathers. But, I found a huge turning point for me was finding Willie Nelson's, Shotgun Willie, released in 72, I think, or maybe it was 74. That album changed my life probably because it just, I didn't understand the switch that happened. I only knew country music, or I only knew, like I said earlier, I only knew rock and roll from that time period.
Yeah.
I didn't know that on the other side, country music was doing the same thing, and they were switching from their old ways into this. And all of a sudden it was like the floodgates opened up, and I was like, what is this? Dreaming My Dreams by Waylon Jennings. Nashville got hit with a huge snowstorm in 2021, early 2021.
I remember that.
And this landscape company that I worked for was in charge. They had the licenses to clean up all the roads and go down to Brentwood and basically get rid of all the snow so that people could come into work the next day.
Yeah.
So we would work like these 18-hour shifts.
Oh my God.
And, salting the sidewalks and cleaning everything up, because it just wouldn't stop snowing. And so you just were out there until you finally had the streets cleared. And my boss, it was me in the front with my boss, and then Alfredo and Jose were in the back. And we just, 18 hours together in this truck. And the album that he was playing constantly was Dreaming My Dreams. And I just remember the first time I heard The Door Is Always Open and Waylon's voice coming over the speakers, and it's just pouring snow. And I was just like, I almost started crying. I was like, what is that? Now, I had been up for 18 hours, so maybe that had something to do with it.
You're a little emotional. Yeah. Yeah.
But I just was like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm not going to sit here and act like I knew all along where I was going. It has been a slow process, it's taken a long time to learn, music.
Yeah,
in general.
I think before artists usually make some of their best work, they figure some things out about themselves. And sounds like that's the journey. Did you get to see any of these guys live, or any of these artists you remember seeing like early in your childhood or anything live, like seeing live shows that you were just like, whoa, that show was marking to me?
Yeah. Jack Johnson, I've seen him a couple of times now. And just this summer, I got to take my dad for the first time to Ascend here down on the river in Nashville, and he got to see his first Jack Johnson show. So that was,
oh wow, nice.
That was pretty emotional. It was kind of a cool thing. I've seen a lot of concerts. I don't know, man. It's different. I'm always inspired, but I probably spend more time watching people perform on YouTube and digesting things through that.
Study.
Really watching, I've spent countless hours watching Stapleton. I've spent countless hours watching Willie Nelson.
Yeah.
And just watching their interactions with the crowd. And you really start to realize at a certain point after you've watched enough game film of theirs that they're just normal dudes.
Yeah.
Just up there, like just having a good time. It's not, we're so good at blowing everything out of proportion because of the lights and the huge stage. But when you're sitting from the comfort of your home watching it on YouTube, you can take away things differently. And at the end of the day, it's just, that's all it is. They're just people that love music, that love people and want to share with people. And that's all anybody can hope to do with this occupation.
Is there an artist that's, currently making stuff that you're like, gosh, I would love to go out opening for them?
I mean, Chris Stapleton is, in my mind, the end all be all. Me and my buddies that play in the band with me have studied their group so much. Nice. He's one of I think he's got the best band in all of rock and country music right now. Lee Pardini on keys and Derek Nixon on drums. I mean, it's just, Dave Cobb, the producer who's produced all his records, coming in and playing guitar. I mean, it's a super group, plus his wife on the harmonies. I mean, it's just, they use all vintage gear. So we've, over the years, our group we only use vintage gear now. We've collected like a nice group of instruments that we use to kind of really capture on stage the same sounds that they were getting back in the day. And, that's awesome. That's a huge inspiration for us. But, guys like Zach Bryan that are starting to take over kind of the younger demographic. I haven't met Zach. I don't know much about him, but I love that he's proven that, you don't, again, with what we've been talking about this whole time. I mean, compared to Zach, my record is super produced. His albums are stripped down to the bare necessities. And the fact that he can, convey a message and a story and a melody to, just your everyday average Joe listener and captivate them completely with, almost nothing. It's amazing. So yeah, that's somebody I would love to connect with down the road and possibly open for and work with. That's closer to my age. Those are probably my two. I also love, Sturgill and Tyler Childers and the whole gamut. Sure, so, we were able to, Coulter Wall was a huge influence, during the pandemic. And, I was listening to his Western Swings and Waltzes album. And I was obsessed with the pedal steel, on that album. So I started digging through the liner notes and found that this guy named Patrick Lyons, who just, lives here in Nashville, played on the record. So I reached out to him and I said, man, I'm going into the studio and I would love for you to come and play guitar and pedal steel and, whatever else. And he was so kind and was like, dude, yeah, for sure. I'll do it. And so all over the album, all the pedal steel, the slide guitar, on Long Way From Home and Heartaches After Heartbreak, all the Skynyrd stuff, Patrick and I worked meticulously to kind of capture. And he that was a kind of a dream come true to be, out digging holes, listening to this guy playing pedal steel, and then to meet him in person and have him record on my album.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah. So it's, the whole process has just been, I could geek out about it all day. It's just, it's been so fun.
Well, man, I appreciate you being on the show, dude. Again, I can't tell people enough. Go listen to the record. Really enjoy it. Go do some work with your hands and put it on somewhere and enjoy it. You got a wisdom and a sound and an authenticity that's well beyond your years. And not to say that you haven't lived a lot of great life, but man, I think you got a lot of things ahead of you, and really appreciate you, one, putting out the record, and two, being on the show. So if you're in a town, go check out JDClaytonofficial.com. You can see like tour dates and get all the links and all that. And then he's at JD Clayton Official on all the socials and things. So go give him a follow on Instagram, keep up with what he's got going on. And most importantly, go listen and share the record. Man, I appreciate you being on the show, JD.
Lee, I really appreciate you taking the time, man. Thanks. Great questions and great conversationalist. I really appreciate you letting me be a part of this.
Absolutely, man. Have a good one.
All right, you too, man. Take care.
Man, what a great dude. I wish that you would go listen to his record right now, because I think that just the way he tells stories and just how real, authentic of a dude he is, I think that you're going to really, really love his music. And try to go catch a show. Check out jdclaytonofficial.com. Try to go catch him out on tour if he's coming to a town near you. Even if he's just in support of somebody, I'm sure the set is going to be fantastic. As you learned in the interview, they put a lot into not just the record itself, but the songwriting and in putting the band together and all that sort of stuff. So he's not coming. We talked a little bit after the episode, and he's not coming down to the Southeast, which is where I'm outside of Atlanta in Georgia. And he's not coming down here right now, but he's going to try to make it down here soon. And I'm absolutely going to go catch him if I at all can, because I can't wait. I'm telling you, I love this record. I said a couple times in the interview, I listened to it, straight through, and I had listened to a few songs before, just kind of clicking around the preview that his publicist had sent over, and I just listened cover to cover and just straight through. I love listening to records straight through. Which, if you never do that, try to. It's a really good experience, because I think artists put a lot of effort into track order and that sort of stuff usually. And so listen to records, straight through when you can. It's really great. But go listen to JD's record. It's out everywhere. I'm going to link it in the show notes. I'm going to put some other links down there to his website, to all the artists that we talked about, like I normally do here on MyFi. So you can go check out some artists maybe you never heard of or you forgot about. You're like, oh man, I want to go listen to CCR now, or I want to go listen to the band, or Willie Nelson or whatever. Just to remind you who we talked about. So check out the show notes, share the show with somebody. If you love MyFi, tell them about it. We have a lot of fun interviewing people about the music that's influenced them and inspired them in their lives and their careers. And we had a great time interviewing JD. JD, thank you, man. If you've gotten to listen back to the episode, we really appreciate it. Hope you have a great spring, and wish you all the success in the world on the record. Make sure you're following MyFi on social so you know when we drop new episodes. We're just at MyFi Podcast everywhere. Make sure you're subscribed. And until next time, have a good one.